Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 7th Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum. My name is Noel, and I will be your technical facilitator today to ensure you have a smooth experience with Zoom. You are at the session titled Complementary Roles of Public and Private Sources of Climate Finance for Nature-Based Solutions. Japanese language simultaneous interpretation is available during this session. The feature has already been activated and is available now. To listen in Japanese language, please click the interpretation button in the menu at the bottom of your screen and select Japanese. For those of you just joining us, welcome. You are at the session titled Complementary Roles of Public and Private Sources of Climate Finance and Nature-Based Solutions. We will begin in just a moment here, but before we get started, we would like to let you know that this meeting will be recorded for documentation purposes. Furthermore, your participation using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen is highly encouraged. The chat box is also available in case you have perspectives you'd like to share or if you need to reach out to me for technical assistance. We are ready to get started. I will now pass the floor to Chris Dickinson, Eco-Management Senior Specialist at Green Climate Fund. Chris, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So yes, my name is Chris Dickinson from the Green Climate Fund. I'd like to say good afternoon and good morning to participants across the Asia Pacific area. And it's my pleasure today to open today's technical session on financing investments and the complementary roles of public and private finance. I hope that everyone has had a chance to take advantage and look at some of the previous sessions over the last 5 days. And you'll have seen for them that Asia Pacific is extremely vulnerable to climate change. In 2020, a record number of disasters related to climate were experienced. And as everyone knows, this has been compounded by the impacts of the COVID pandemic right across the region, hitting the countries in the Asia Pacific very hard, especially those countries that depend a lot on tourism for their economy. And as previous speakers will have talked this week about technical policy issues related to nature-based solutions, we can see that from mangrove protection to reducing the impact of storm protection to regenerative and climate-smart agriculture, they can all contribute to building resilience and helping support communities adapt to climate change. So today we have opportunity to bring together a panel of experienced experts from the public and private sector to discuss the key challenges to mobilizing finance for nature-based solutions, and also to give some experience from working within their organizations, how it's been, what they've learned from successful activities. So first of all, the session will have a keynote speech. I'll introduce the speaker in a second, followed by a technical panel. And we encourage you to put questions in the chat, and we will try to address those either through writing to you or bring in some of them to the panel discussion. If you would like to address a particular question to one of the panel members, then please go ahead and mention the name too. So first of all, without much further ado, I will start the keynote speech. So we have the pleasure today to have Mr. Takayuki Hagiwara from the Food and Agriculture Organization from the Regional Asia Pacific Office. Mr. Takayuki is a MSc degree in Forestry and Environment from Yale University. He is currently the Regional Program Lead at FAO Regional Asia Pacific. He's also been involved in Green Climate Fund proposals, including the successful development of the one for the Indus Basin on community resilience, agriculture, and water management. He's got over 25 years experience, including 17 at the FAO's Investment Center. So he brings together a lot of experience and ideas. So I'll hand over to Taka, and I'll see you after his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, everyone. And it's very honored to be here. My name is Takayuki Hagiwara. I go by Taka, and hello from Bangkok. And it's a pleasure to be here. I will tell my story, and I hope that it will serve as the main purpose as a keynote speech. In the winter of the 1987, I was on the boat from Kobe to Shanghai. The purpose of the trip was to see the Silk Road and the vast nature of the continent. The trip to the western part of China to visit Silk Road was fantastic. I was young. Back then, China was still to be developed. I felt like a Marco Polo in a way, slipped into the old days. After trip to the Silk Road, then I headed to Tibet. It was open by bus. Then I headed to Nepal by an old Land Cruiser, which I rented with a group of the people. I saw Mount Everest from the Tibetan side. It was a great view. And I crossed the border on foot. There was no road. So I crossed the mountain and entered into the Nepal. I got a Nepalese stamp on my passport, and then I walked and then found the bus to the Kathmandu. I hoisted myself on the rooftop of the bus to Kathmandu. The bus was full and the roof was only the space that I could find. I was really hoping to see the beautiful nature of Nepal from the rooftop of the bus. However, I realized that I was naive. What I saw was devastation of nature, deforestation, and so many erosion and landslides. Looking back, this bus trip was my seed to pursue my career as a natural resource management specialist. I finished the trip, then returned to Japan. I graduated from a university, then I started to work as a salaryman, like many other Japanese university graduates do. I was commuting to Tokyo every day with a packed train in 1980s, late 1980s. Actually, I lost the purpose of my life then, and my mind was empty while I was working in Tokyo. One day, I was waiting in the train home, and then suddenly the seed that planted on the Nepal rooftop journey germinated. I thought myself that I have to plant trees. I was naive still. I quit the job and I went to US to study forestry, the participatory resource management. I thought it is the people who cut trees and destroy the nature. But at the same time, it is the people who can plant trees and restore nature. I also thought if the tree that I plant with people, they will absorb carbon and mitigate the climate change. Around year 2000, after I graduated from a master's degree, I was talking to the farmers in Kenya about the importance of planting trees. He agreed that it's very important to plant trees, but he simply said, Mr. Taka, I'm sorry, I can't eat trees. His words were the game changer to me. And then I designed a project to use Farmer Field School, which is the FAO's good implementation methodology, and integrate farm forestry, combining agriculture to bring about the behavioral changes of the people. Back then, there were so much protests from my forestry colleagues. Mr. Taka, why foresters have to do with agriculture? But the more we worked on agriculture, the more we received the respect from the farmers. So our foresters changed their perspective on the forestry, people, and agriculture through the Farmer Field School. But again, soon we hit another problem. The Farmer Field School is just a school. And once they graduate from the school, they have to sustain their livelihood by themselves. Like me after graduating from university. I have to survive, and the farmer have to survive. The farmer started saying, Mr. Taka, I'm grateful on the Farmer Field School and I've become the expert on the farm forestry, but I don't have the money to invest into the knowledge that I gained from the Farmer Field School. This was another game changer. So I designed another project combining farm, forestry, livelihood, and value chain development, but more importantly, rural financing. The key success of the project was a loan arrangement for the farmers. I negotiated with the Equity Bank in Kenya and developed a guarantee loan. And this was successful, and it taught me that the importance of investment fund for the farmers. What farmer needs is not handouts, but the loan and recognized as an important customer of the bank. We all know that it is really risky for any private banks to provide loans to the farmers who often illiterate. And many banks do not know how to develop financial product to provide the loans to the farmers. Banks, private banks need paperwork, collaterals, repayment, and etc., go on and on. And this is where the organization like GCF and an FAO can do a lot to develop the risking mechanism with blended financing. When I was preparing the climate resilient agriculture project in Pakistan for GCF, I met so many farmers who are paying still nowadays more than 30% of interest to the money they borrow from middlemen. I was really shocked by talking to these farmers. It's still, the 2018, and we are living in the year of 2020s. They pay back with the harvest. They are left with very little, and they are forced to borrow more money from the middlemen. And those middlemen play a very important role, to be honest, in those rural communities as an informal sector money lender, but we could do more for the farmers who have deal with those climate change. FAO has a lot to offer and are doing a lot with those farmers who are trying to cope with the climate changes. But I must confess that I'm not succeeding yet to reverse the trend. Remember, we were talking about climate change around the beginning of 1990s, and the Kyoto Protocol was established around the 1992, if I remember correctly. And after 30 years now, we are still talking about climate change. And I must say that we have not been succeeding to stop climate change after 30 years. With GCF, and I'm really hoping that the FAO would do more and help those who would suffer from climate change together by developing the risking mechanism and the blended finances with the private sectors to deal with climate change. GCF alone, FAO alone, we can't do this. We need everybody's, and we need more money. But we need really banks to join us to reduce risks of climate change by financing farmers or the other private sectors who face the climate change. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen who are listening to this, I really hope that you come up with innovation and solutions based on the discussion you had yesterday or this week and today. But I must repeat, what farmers who will face the climate change don't need handout. They need to be recognized as a part of the formal sector, as an important player who support the people who consume food every day. And we need to provide them loans for investment and operations and with a decent interest rate. What those farmers need is respect and the lending system that they can maintain their dignity as producers and the challengers to face the climate change. And I hope you join us to work with us, to work with the producers and those farmers. Thank you very much. And I hope we have a good discussion after that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Taka. That was very inspiring and very interesting to hear your journey from student to senior professional. I think it highlights a few things. We're always learning in this field of climate change, natural resource management, and we can also learn from farmers as well as academics. And it also, you raised the point about the huge financial challenge that we have. Although the Green Climate Fund is the largest climate change fund, the numbers that are needed for investment per year is in the hundreds of billions per year to address global challenges. So we must tackle things in more innovative ways and also with the private sector. So moving on to the panel discussion, I would like to introduce the moderator, Mr. Ben Vickers. Ben is currently working as a forest, land use and ecosystem specialist at the Green Climate Fund in the Office of Compliance. And prior to this, he's had considerable work experience, particularly in Asia Pacific for many, many years, and also with the Food and Agriculture Organization as one of the lead REDD+ specialists supporting Asia and Pacific. So he brings a wealth of experience. And I know Ben is also particularly interested in community resource management and working with local people, as well as with the private sector. So Ben, shall I hand over to you now? And once again, I encourage people to write questions in the chat. So thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. Yes, we are fortunate, as you mentioned earlier, to have with us today 4 distinguished panelists, and I'll introduce them now. Dr. Frank Riceberman is the Director General of the Global Green Growth Institute and leads the GGGI in supporting governments to transition towards a model of economic growth that is environmentally sustainable and socially inclusive. With over 30 years' experience addressing the challenges of environmental sustainability and poverty reduction with leading international organizations and philanthropic foundations, he was appointed as the Director General of the Institute in 2016. In this role, Dr. Riceberman engages with senior international stakeholders to drive the green growth agenda and help mobilize finance for climate action and sustainable development, thus supporting GGGI members and partner governments to implement their NDCs under the Paris Agreement and achieve their SDG targets. Good afternoon, Frank.
Good afternoon, Ben, and thanks for that nice introduction.
Okay, our second panelist is Ms. Farzana Chowdhury. She is a chartered insurer and the Managing Director and CEO of Green Delta Insurance Company, the first and the youngest female CEO in the industry in Bangladesh. She has been recognized by the UN Global Compact as a local SDG pioneer for women's economic security through Nibadita, a comprehensive insurance scheme for women. She received the prestigious Public Trust Award from the UK Chartered Insurance Institute, the 2019 Woman Leader of the Year in the Asian Insurance Industry Awards, and an honorable mention for excellence in sustainability by the World Economic Forum in 2020. Farzana aims to mobilize the insurance industry for empowerment of marginal populations through economic security and financial inclusion. Under her stewardship, Green Delta Insurance collaborated with the government of Bangladesh on the Shasto Shuroka Karmasuchi project, which has ensured health coverage of more than 650,000 people below the poverty line. Good morning, Farzana.
Good morning, Ben, and hello, everyone. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be here to share my experience at this panel.
Okay, our next panelist is Dr. Anya Grabicki. She is Deputy Director of External Affairs at the Green Climate Fund. She is a South African chemical engineer who worked for a major oil company before completing a PhD at Imperial College London. She worked in academia and consulting on water, environment, and development issues before becoming the coordinator of the CGIAR Challenge Program on Water and Food. For 6 years, she headed the Global Water Partnership as Executive Secretary, and then served as the Deputy Secretary General and Acting Secretary General of the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. Anya was recently the coordinating lead author for the freshwater chapters of the 6th Global Environmental Outlook Report. And for the last 10 years, she has focused on the links between water and climate, including water-related disasters, prior to joining GCF in 2019. Good afternoon, Anya.
Thank you very much, Ben, and good afternoon, everyone. It's such an honor to be here and to have the opportunity to talk about nature-based solutions and finance in the same breath. Thank you.
Okay, and finally, our fourth panelist is Richard McNally. Richard is the Climate Change and Business Advisor at the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development. For the past 20 years, Richard has been working for several international organizations, providing strategic direction, knowledge leadership, business development, and managing the design and delivery of over 20 major projects and funds across Asia and Africa. Over the past decade, he has increasingly been working with the private sector and financial institutions to help scale up impact. In his role with Dfcd, he helps to originate, assess, and manage deals with a thematic focus on climate change adaptation, through which Dfcd aims to raise around 800 million euros of investment, primarily for nature-based solutions. Richard has been based in Southeast Asia for the past 15 years and has deep knowledge of the countries in this region, as well as East and West Africa. Richard is also an international sectoral expert for the GCF. And good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Ben, and good morning, everybody.
Okay, well, we'll get straight into the panel discussion. I will try and make sure we keep to time. And during the discussion, please, everyone listening in, as Chris mentioned, please do enter questions into the chat, and we'll try to aim for about half an hour after the panel discussion to have a question and answer session with the panelists. But first, I'd like to ask panelists each to introduce the topic with some quick ideas on the key global trends in public and private finance and investment for nature-based solutions. So first, can I come to you, Frank, for your initial thoughts on this?
Sure, thank you, Ben. And yes, it was good to hear Mr. Taka on his personal journey. And indeed, I recognize that. I think in GGI, we have a lot of colleagues who feel like that. GGI, as you said, was set up by a number of countries to help countries in their transition to a green growth model, both come up with green growth policies and investment projects. So indeed, we mobilize finance in a number of areas. And we find that it's relatively easy to mobilize finance for projects, green projects related to renewable energy, even waste management, more and more so for sustainable transportation. But nature-based solutions is trickier. It's trickier to find private investors without public investment. So I think this remains an area where there's clearly now increased public interest, more and more donors putting nature-based solutions on the agenda. The UK as COP26 chair, having a strong focus on nature-based solutions. So I think there will be additional public finance available in coming years, and that should be used to leverage the private sector, to reduce the risks or to set up, in a way, ways and means to bring the private sector more into those nature-based solutions. And I would say that when we talk about the private sector, we often think of large companies, but I think in nature-based solutions and in climate-smart agriculture, ideally we think of the farmers as the private sector, or small green entrepreneurs, or small and medium enterprises. So I'd particularly like to focus a bit in this panel on opportunities to stimulate the small green entrepreneurs through the use of public money, through public-private partnerships. Maybe leave it at that for my first intervention. Back to you, Ben.
Okay, thanks, Frank. And can I come to you, Farzana, for your thoughts, maybe focusing on your experience in the South Asian region in particular?
Thank you. South Asia is the home of 3 of the top 5 countries in terms of vulnerability to climate change globally, and it thus urgently needs climate investments to enhance resilience and unlock opportunities for low carbon growth. And the climate impacts could reduce its annual growth domestic product by an average of 1.8% by 2015, rising to 8.8% by 2100. And Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Sri Lanka, all these countries have ratified 2015 Paris Agreement and pledged to tackle climate change in support of it as a part of their ambitious long-term economic growth and sustainable development plans. And climate business activity in key sectors such as renewable energy, green buildings, energy efficiency has increased by 18% to 100 gigawatts across Bangladesh, India, Nepal collectively between 2014 and 2016. Only 3% of the global climate finance is going towards nature-based climate solutions, where the government's target to reach is the net zero carbon emission by 2050. And due to rapid urbanization, green buildings represent as an investment potential totaling more than 1.5 trillion across South Asia between 2018 and 2030. And green transport infrastructure and electric vehicles create an opportunity of over 950 billion by 2030. And climate resilient infrastructure in South Asia, we've seen that Bangladesh and India have an investment potential of about 2.2 trillion, which is concentrated in the construction of green buildings, ports, rail transport infrastructure, and energy efficiency. And the emerging solutions could be renewable energy transport, green buildings, urban wastewater, climate smart agriculture, and municipal solid waste management. To meet its, I mean, if you see the scope of the investments in the nature-based solutions in emerging countries, Nepal can track 2.5 billion in electric vehicle investments to achieve its NDC target and its green fleet. Every year, Bangladesh builds 500,000 urban homes and 3.5 billion rural homes and 180 billion investment opportunities for the green building sector. And then 6.2 billion in climate smart investments are needed to increase coverage of solid and waterways management services in Sri Lankan cities. And India needs $670 billion invested in electric vehicles to meet its target of electrifying all new car sales by 2030. And Maldives' climate smart investments potential is estimated 2 billion between 2018 and 2030. Bhutan's climate smart investment potential estimated 42 billion between 2018 and 30. And every countries have taken a lot of investments opportunities from the private sectors and the public sector. And Bangladesh is a country which has taken the SDG goals very seriously, and it has been embedded in all the ministerial KPIs, and in the private sectors and the development organizations are working towards that. Sri Lanka aims to promote private and public investments in environmental conservation projects through corporate social responsibility and programs. So there are huge potentials for the public and private sector's investments in these countries in South Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Farzana. That was a very comprehensive summary of these exciting potentials in South Asia. So can I come to you, please, Anya, for your perspectives on the initial question?
Yes, thanks very much, Ben. So what I'd like to zoom in on is the potential of climate finance to support nature-based solutions and nature-based resilience. Climate finance is still a relatively new game. It's I think we're at the start of a long road. And one of the biggest problems that we have is a lack of proper metrics, which will enable the finance world to understand what is actually happening in terms of financing nature-based solutions and what the opportunities really are. So having said that, let's have a look at what's happening in climate finance. There was a very famous pledge that was repeated many times of reaching $100 billion of climate finance by 2020. I think that we all know by now that wasn't reached. There was about $80 billion of climate finance made available to the world in 2020. And one of the biggest problems, of course, is that the vast bulk of that has gone to mitigation and only a small fraction has gone to adaptation. So in fact, only in the last year that figures are readily available and accurate is 2018. And in that year, only 7% of climate finance actually went to adaptation. Now, having said that, let's talk a little bit about how this looks inside the Green Climate Fund and how one can access financing for nature-based solutions within GCF. In fact, we have two buckets. One on the mitigation side, which is the results area of forests and land use, which supports various projects for nature-based solutions. And then on the adaptation side, we have ecosystems and ecosystem services as a results area. Both of these together, if one looks over the history of the Green Climate Fund, which is only 5 years old, so we're talking about since 2015 and the Paris Agreement. Over those 5 years, the GCF has invested about $900 million, both in forests and land use and ecosystems and ecosystem services. And we currently have a pipeline of about $5 billion in terms of projects that cover this broad area of nature-based solutions and resilience from nature. So yeah, we really are at the start of a long road. I think that we need to find ways to very rapidly scale up. And the problem here is that by their very nature, local solutions are context specific. And in particular, adaptation needs to be a locally led activity, a community-based activity, as we heard in the plenary session of the stream from Professor Salim ul-Haq. So how do we actually upscale in that context? One of the things that GCF is doing is that we have projects which are funds of funds. So for example, the Green Climate Fund is working with the German bank, KfW. We work through partners in order to develop a fund of funds for small ecosystem-based coastal zone management projects in 4 countries on the east coast of Africa. It's called the Blue Action Fund. It's a fund within which the community-based projects can apply for grants to the fund, and GCF has provided $30 million into this fund. KfW has provided co-financing of $36 million. And we're very much looking forward to seeing, a multitude of small-scale nature-based solutions actually being funded by this. Another example of the way in which GCF is looking to scale up and scale out is in supporting the Great Green Wall program in Africa. This is a program which has been going for 12 years. There have been numerous organizations, UNCCD, FAO, and we have now IFAD, the International Fund for Agriculture Development, investing projects across 11 countries. Up to now, it's been relatively small-scale projects, relatively small-scale financing. But the Great Green Wall is now ready for scale-up. And together with IFAD, GCF is looking to invest about $1 billion in a series of projects which have yet to be approved by the board. But the concept is of a large regional program in a similar biome, a similar ecosystem along the southern border of the Sahel. So I think, these are 2 ways in which we can really start to scale up nature-based solutions in terms of financing. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Anya. So very quickly, Richard, if you are able to, before we move on, just give your perspective on the key global trends particularly in private finance and investment.
Thank you very much, Ben. Yeah, I'll just feedback a few trends that we're seeing, particularly from the perspective of private investment. I think we all know, and I'm sure it's been discussed at length during the week, that current flows of adaptation finance continue to be dominated by the public entities and the continued reliance on grant funding, and how we need, in order to reach this transformational change, as mentioned by the other panelists, is much more private sector investment. If we look at the numbers of private capital coming into climate adaptation, it's very, very low. One of the more promising trends that we are seeing is if we look at the overall funds coming from DFIs, development financial institutes such as the GCF, the World Bank or Asian Development Bank, we're seeing that there's an increasing amount of adaptation finance coming from these institutes. And this is probably most likely as a response to the Paris Agreement and the requirement to balance adaptation finance with mitigation finance. while I mentioned the DFIs, these are obviously public entities. I think it's very critical to highlight this trend because the DFIs have been critical in terms of providing concessional finance to then crowd in the private sector. If we look at the climate change mitigation, the role of DFI is to really provide that concessional finance and crowd in private sector has been transformational, and we're now reaping the benefits of that trend. Maybe just quickly, other trends that we're seeing is the growth of blended finance, different blended vehicles, which I'll talk about later, how to combine public and private finance together into one vehicle where the public finance de-risks the private finance. We're seeing, including the Dutch Fund for Climate Development, a number of different modalities developing, which again is a very positive trend. GCF, private sector facilities, I think very much leading the way in this as well, looking at providing anchor investments for various first loss guarantees to then attract public finance and then private sector commercial finance. So some of the trends we're seeing are very promising, while at the same time we recognize a lot more funding is needed. Maybe a final trend to mention is there's a growth in dedicated investment funds now, which are focused on climate change adaptation. These include Acumen, the Global Adaptation Resilience Fund, and the fund that I'm working with, the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, which currently requires at least 60% of its investment goes into climate adaptation, the water sector, the agriculture sector, and nature-based solutions. What we know, just to wrap up quickly, what we know is that the levels are way below how much we need. And later on in my later intervention, I'll look at some of the barriers to private sector investment and how we can overcome these barriers. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Richard. So there's some initial ideas, initial thoughts on the key trends in nature-based solutions and adaptation, finance, mobilization. Now, if I can come back to some of these issues in more detail, and particularly with a focus on COVID-19 and the green recovery. Frank, how can public and private investment be targeted to ensure efficient and effective recovery of national economies from COVID-19 while maximizing opportunities for achieving NDC goals? Frank, if you can unmute, please.
I'm unmuting right now. I said, for pretty much every government, when they come up with their recovery plans, the number one concern is employment. And the good news is that there are many green jobs in different green investment opportunities, including in nature-based solutions. In fact, probably the biggest difference between, say, the Green New Deal in Korea, where there's a heavy emphasis on digital and, say, technology solutions, and the kind of recommendations that we come up with for recovery plans for our members, mostly developing countries and emerging economies, is that we recommend to our governments to put much more emphasis on nature-based solutions and on climate-smart agriculture. Taking an example from Colombia, for instance, while Colombia has had much of its public income from fossil fuel, from oil and from coal, their future is likely more in a forest-based economy. And we've helped the government come up with a green growth plan where bioeconomy was a key part. And now that strategy is used to attract, if you like, the kind of investments that the government makes available for the green recovery, to show that nature-based solutions can indeed provide green jobs. And the key opportunity there is to help small businesses in these forest-based value chains. And public money can be used to get them started, because often those green companies, particularly when they're startups, find it hard to get money from banks or from regular commercial channels. So indeed, the kind of initiatives that Richard was also indicating, where you can come up with public money that helps those companies get started, get into a phase where they can get money from regular commercial banks, that we think is a critical area. Now, in some other countries, like in Peru, for instance, we see that a lot of smallholders aren't entering into the formal sector because they don't have official land titles, and governments actually do come up with some programs to improve the title of smallholders if they promise to be good stewards of the land, not to cut the trees. But the uptake of such programs is very small because indeed farmers find it difficult to get access to these more formal value chains. So again, using public money through some creative funds or other opportunities like Richard was indicating to bring those farmers into the formal economy, have them sign up to those commitments to be good stewards of the land and help them have a decent income. I think that's at the heart of the matter. You know, you take that to Africa and there are still, the bulk of the poor people are in rural areas. Their future will have to be from agriculture. That is threatened through climate change. So using public funds to increase their resilience through smart investments in agroforestry or solar-powered irrigation, or connecting those farmers better to international markets are all big opportunities we see that combine green jobs and therefore this key investment opportunity in a green recovery with reduction of poverty and of course stepping up, accelerating climate action. You know, I can go on and on there about the opportunities. The best in a way would be if we are able, as we are able to do in some value chains that people have worked on for many years, like coffee or chocolate, where smallholder farmers are providing a large share of the product by improving their quality of the product, by having more of the processing done in country and connecting them to these international companies that have access to markets. We can indeed combine these three things, having real development, recovering from the pandemic, and then stepping up both adaptation and mitigation, accelerating climate action. In Asia, there are, of course, also large opportunities to work on things like peatland restoration or mangrove restoration. The challenge there is that private investment has mostly gone in the opposite direction in palm oil plantations. So finding private sector opportunities that actually work with nature rather than against it is a critical challenge, but we believe there are opportunities, and sometimes that is coming up with government in big, REDD+ focused management plans, and then creating the kind of enabling conditions where small companies that are able to work with nature rather than against can make inroads, while at the same time finding opportunities to work with those large companies that are there, the oil palm companies. How can we make them at least more sustainable? That's challenging, but interesting. So I think there's a whole range of opportunities to work on nature-based solutions. In almost all cases, I think putting farmers or poor people in those systems in the center and using a model where public and private finance come together is going to be critical in this area. And yes, some have already said it, we need better data as well, particularly for nature-based solutions. It is much less easy to see what the emission reductions are than, say, for renewable energy. So we can also collaborate through public funding on having better methodologies, better MRVs that give better data, and that I think will attract more private investors into the sector as well, into nature-based solutions, if they have clearer numbers on the kind of emission reductions that can be achieved, particularly if we are able to get a global carbon market, if we can agree to, Article 6 under the Paris Agreement at the next COP. But then I'm introducing some other technical issues that I'm not sure we can dive into in much detail in the panel, but happy to come back to it if there is appetite. Back over to you, Ben.
Thanks very much, Frank. Yes, so very important to note, as you said, the focus on green jobs and employment that many countries are going to emphasize in recovery plans, and also the push that tends to go towards many activities that are in fact going the other direction from nature-based solutions towards palm oil investments and other areas where there are more job opportunities. So if I can come to you, Anya, does the COVID recovery process offer an opportunity or an impediment to incorporate full ecosystem valuation models into public and private sector investment systems?
Thanks, Ben. Before I dive into that, I'd just like to start with the big picture. And that's certainly, you know, the enormous recovery stimulus funds that countries are making available really gives an opportunity here to build back green. And I think there's a lot being written about that. GCF is certainly really working on this issue very hard with some top economists, Joseph Stiglitz and others, in order to really identify the multiple opportunities coming out from this crisis. I think that, let me just name a couple of them. So one of the areas, for example, where countries are becoming increasingly indebted through the COVID crisis, the COVID pandemic. In the past, there have been experiments with debt for nature swaps. We're now really looking to expand this idea and to work with this whole issue of sovereign debt at national level to develop, you know, debt for climate swaps. And there's tremendous interest in this idea. Obviously, the whole point there is that the way in which the forgiven debt would then be used by the country and invested in climate projects, that would be subject to the investment criteria of the Green Climate Fund and to some very strict metrics and requirements. But we certainly see some of the small island developing states who are starting to take advantage of this opportunity. And we're also seeing some other highly indebted countries who are starting to be really interested in this approach, where the creditor countries are also prepared to really look at debt for climate swaps as a way of moving this whole climate agenda forward in the developing world. So that's one example. Many potential green projects, nature-based solutions could be financed by that route, by these debt for climate swaps. Another example that we're looking at is the whole area of de-risking infrastructure investments. There's an enormous infrastructure gap in developing countries, and there are huge savings pools in the developed world that are actually looking now for investments to finance. So the whole idea here is to actually de-risk these investments, to aggregate these investments, and to provide a home for very large scale investment in green infrastructure projects, which will involve both hard and soft infrastructure, you know, both nature-based solutions, but also, you know, tangible issues such as building sea walls, at the same time making progress in terms of, for example, green concrete, how to make cement less emissions intensive, right, in this big infrastructure push. I think this is going to be a huge opportunity market in the green recovery. And you know, there are a number of coalitions, such as the Coalition for Climate Resilient Investment, the CDRI, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, which GCF is very much involved with. And we're trying to ensure that the principles of green infrastructure are built into these initiatives from the start. And we are developing then vehicles for investing in de-risking infrastructure projects, which will attract private sector investment and be a safe investment home in the long term. Perhaps I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Anya. So we're going to be moving on a little bit now to address some of the key challenges that we see in development of finance and investment opportunities for adaptation. So I could first perhaps come to you, Farzana. What do you see as the key risks and challenges involved in the mobilization of private sector finance for climate change adaptation project development, and how can they be overcome?
Thank you. I may talk about the experience, the country experience, and also the company experience in Bangladesh. When Bangladesh had the climate change project with World Bank back in the 70s, without the technology and appropriate technology and weather data, it was not a successful project. And since then, no further effort has been taken for this project. So back in 2011, we've started gathering all the information and the study, the research, and then found out that it can be very important to develop a more transparent model by adopting the technology. And since then, we have joined hand with our equity investor IFC, World Bank, and we have come with a pilot project back in 2015, where the characteristics of this project was like more, we need to have a resilient and sustainable business model through multi-stakeholder approach, which was one of the key success factor here, and creating a win-win solution for every related stakeholder through cross-sectoral collaboration, engaging farmers in the product development process, technology-driven innovation solution in the business model, developing an adaptive solutions with increased coping capacity through customizable products, pocket-sized solution, best suited for a marginal population, be able to mitigate financial and non-financial risk arising from extreme climate events, develop a scope for more managed retreat throughout the process as a sustainable measure. And we will look for the project to have adaptability, sensitivity to climate change, coping capacity, resilience, sensitivity towards vulnerability. And with the help of the IFC, we had the technical assistance where we got the actual support, and also with a weather service company which helped us to which provides the weather forecast and solutions, and also is a leading weather forecasting and agriculture risk solution company, which really helped us. And this company created an interpolated online weather data grid for us, for Green Delta, where already around 1,500 weather data points were situated to collect the weather data, like rainfall data, temperature data. The interpolated data grid have last 40 years of weather data. And what we have also taken help as a weather data. We've taken the ground level help from Bangladesh Meteorological Department, BMD, Bangladesh Water Development Board, automated weather stations. And then I mentioned about the interpolated data, the web portal-based data grid. Also the satellite data I've mentioned, and also the technology that was used was automated historical and real-time weather data acquisition, automated claim monitoring, digitalized claim disbursement through MFS, the microfinance institutions, and also financial services that has come up recently. And we've also, what we've done is in the index-based crop insurance, we started with only few hundred. It took us 3-4 years to actually, because of the lack of awareness in Bangladesh for the insurance, because the insurance concept is still as an awareness phase, whether people don't understand the benefits, and of course the farmers, they don't even they're not even aware what are the benefits, So and of course the pricing is a great challenge. I would talk about later. And since then, I think this technology and this satellite data and the quick claim disbursement has helped us reach more than 76,000 households, and beneficiary is more than 66,000, and outreach is more than 9,500 households, and in 19 districts and 8 divisions. And the perils that we have covered is excess rainfall, unseasonal rainfall, financial risk, low temperature, drought, cold wave, flood, humidity, sunshine, hour, etc. And through this, we've covered 4 SDG: no poverty, zero hunger, industry innovation, infrastructure, partnership, and goals. And through this, what we have done in the livestock insurance also. Last year, we've taken up a project where it's like Uberization of a cow, transforming a cow into an asset. So through by partnering with a telco and with a bank, it's like a bundled product, and the farmers can avail a loan, because through a collar tag they can get information regarding the cows and the locality and everything. So the other thing is like the lessons that we have learned from the from this project, we've developed and implemented a disruptive collaborative business model successfully, including non-state actors, specialized weather data providers, and digital financial service providers, knowledge of developing multi-peril weather index products for any crop within Bangladesh. This was one of our key, I would say, success factor that has helped us to learn quickly about multiple products, and in a very quick span of time. And multi-peril products are more effective and helpful from the farmer's perspective, that we have also found out by engaging with them. Since if there was no initial rainfall cover, there would have been no claim this year. So the crop loss for flood is not only the cause of the crop loss. We have also found out their excess rainfall just before the harvesting can also be a vital risk for how the water basin rice production that we have found from our experience. And knowledge of developing multi-peril weather index products from any crop I mentioned, and knowledge of designing a successful collaborative model, which I've also mentioned, and experience the understanding the gap between the legislative regulatory framework and the ground level reality, and use proper dynamic technology for the maximizing of the outcome of the product. Recently, the finance ministry, and I would like to mention that without the support of the agriculture ministry or anyone, we have actually started this pilot project step by step, and by going out and reaching out to the farmers, having all those meetings with them and all those on-job trainings, and discussing with them, being acting like a farmer, that has helped us. And we've just joined hands with the finance ministry, that water basin project, pilot project we have started. We've also given during the AMFAN a few months ago, we've actually given claim coverage for 3,000 affected farmers. And the challenges that we have seen is, the pricing I've mentioned, because the way we're now, we are in the commercial phase, and we have commercialized our products, join hands with partners like input farms, aggregators, seed companies, contract farming companies, banks, MFIs, and NGOs, donor agencies, microcredit lenders. So and from our own CSR funds, which we said that it's socio-commercial viable projects that will gain momentum and also gain revenue. So so the financing it's still an issue here, although finance ministry has come forward, but there are the satellite, we're using Indian satellite, where we have Bangladesh Bangabandhu satellite launched a few years ago, and that can be also used we're also in the discussion with the government that where this satellite can be used in developing products so the pricing can be lower. And of course, it's reinsured outside, so pricing has to be, and someone has to give the subsidy. So no, I mean, like the other countries, we are not in a position to get the subsidy or any kind of impact funds, big funds from the government. So there is a lot of I would say areas, I mean, opportunities for other practitioners or other institutions joining hands together in a multi-stakeholder approach. And the other thing is like, we are having a lot of floods and a lot of other events. So that also kind of cripples sometimes, the mindset of the farmers. And during the pandemic, it was not also possible for our field offices to go and visit. So in that case, those, I said, mobile financial service companies has also helped us. So that is another option that through them, it can be really helpful to kind of help these farmers to get the financial assistance. Just to say that they're assessing, and also the tax incentive and VAT and tax incentive for those companies who are actually, going forward and investing money in these projects. So we need the government assistance and also the donor funds as well. So assessing, understanding, and orienting customers and design an efficient product, ensuring security and stability. So we need to kind of have the awareness from a holistic approach, and everyone should speak the same language. I mentioned about the arranging funds and also the regulatory guideline. There is a lot of gray area and a lot of regulatory guidelines needs to be in place for that, so that also there are a lot of areas that the NGOs are actually giving the insurance service in Bangladesh, where the law is that, okay, it should be provided by the insurance service provider. So there's a kind of, so that's why the penetration of insurance is less than 1%. So through that, I think we can gain more than 5% penetration if we have, a lot of work with other organizations who are actually providing insurance services. Those are not insurance services, but it's a kind of a self-insuring. Then government support and long-term partnership. This is something that I wanted to mention, that we need patience, because innovation leads towards disruptive solutions, business solutions, and that requires patience and also learning. And then minimize regulatory obstacles from incorporating regulatory bodies, promote beneficiary parties to avoid communication gaps. So we need to speak their language to actually go to the farmers and give a solution, provide a solution that requires their needs instead of selling only a product. Remote operation to be started, as using existing network and create new network. So we are having a lot of difficulties also sometimes to get into connecting with those network partners. And the other thing is like arranging alternate data source. That is something that also we need to also think about, and engaging in projects and initiatives taken by government and development organization. If this pilot project rolls out, and then if it is mandatory for all the farmers to have this insurance, then other insurers and other organizations will come forward and provide these services. And
Farzana, I think I'm going to have to bring in Richard, because we are running short of time. Is that okay? We can come back. We have questions. We'll come back to you. But thank you very much. There's some really rich experiences from your work in Bangladesh, which I'm sure we'll get some feedback from the audience. But in the meantime, Richard, can I come to you for some insights from your side, particularly from the perspective of catalyzing large-scale investments from FMOs, and the characteristics of a successful climate change adaptation investment or project, with some specific examples, if you could.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ben. I'll very much focus around the perspective of the private investors. I think there's many challenges for private investors in terms of investing into climate change adaptation, nature-based solutions. I'd like to mention three key ones, and in particular how the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, which I'm working on, is trying to overcome these three barriers, which is maybe an example for other blended investment facilities of how maybe it can overcome these barriers. So I think the first one, and this was mentioned by Anya, was there's a real, currently there's a lack of clarity on what constitutes investment into climate change adaptation, where to invest and how to measure it. So without clear metrics on impact, without clear understanding of what actually constitutes investment into climate change adaptation, it's very hard for investors to immediately be able to put their money into climate change adaptation. There's no asset class of climate change adaptation currently, so that creates a lot of confusion, potential for maladaptation investments, or it could be the case that the investors are already investing into climate resilient goods and services, but they don't know they are. So until there's more clarity around what constitutes investment into this, it's going to be deter the investment community. A second key challenge, which I think is similar to many investment funds, is a lack of pipeline, investable pipeline. Investors need to have something to invest into. If that's not the case in countries, then clearly that's going to deter their interest. Then a third key challenge, I believe, is the high risk of investing into climate adaptation. Not only are you investing into sometimes more complex environments or more complex political environments, but also you're investing into very risky, vulnerable areas. So trying to get private capital to go where the risks are higher is against your normal rules of investment. So just to mention as a more tangible example, and I have one slide here. The Dutch Fund for Climate and Development was designed to overcome these three barriers, and I will very quickly go through how we've tried to overcome these three barriers as part of the Dutch Fund. You can see it in the graphic there. Just a little bit of flavor on the Dutch Fund for Climate Development. So it's initially 160 million from the Dutch government to aim to leverage 800 million to $1 billion on climate change adaptation in projects in Asia and in Africa. It has three facilities. The water facility, so we're looking at investment into climate adaptation water projects. The land use facility, which is agriculture, nature-based solutions. And then the origination facility, which is a facility which feeds those two facilities. So how does the DFCD respond to these barriers? So firstly, the first barrier in terms of getting clarity on where to invest or how to measure it, what we've done is we've identified key vulnerable landscapes. So we focus on key landscapes. For example, in Asia, that's the mega deltas. In Africa, the arid and semi-arid regions. Also critical peatlands landscapes of Indonesia. These are all key landscapes that we're trying to focus around. And within those landscapes, we carry out analysis of the climate risks and then what are the investment responses. So we try to match the investments with the risks as far as possible within these key landscapes. On top of that, we have what we call priority investment themes. So what we've done is we've overlaid the, where we see is the high impact to climate resilient needs from the UNFCCC 1.5 degree report and overlaid that with the commercial viability of the different investment classes to see where is the priority to put investment both thematically and geographically with the themes and the landscapes. For each of these, we've developed metrics then to help measure our response in terms of investment and how that's actually having an impact. And I think was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of uncertainty and maybe lack of clarity and around these metrics and what exactly we're measuring and how to measure it. The second barrier which I mentioned was how do we develop a project pipeline? For us, this is the key, very, very critical in terms of a lot of the initial ideas, I think Frank and others were mentioning are at a very early stage. They're requiring public funds, but how do you gravitate them all the way to private investment? Quite often the scale is too small or the complexity or the costs of originating these deals is very difficult. So the DFCD has developed what's called the origination facility. And that provides, that's 15 million euros to provide grants and TA to work with companies to help them go through this early phase of design and structuring investment deals. Throughout this stage, we work with the investors so that we know from the beginning how or exactly what the investors want to invest into, to make sure the deals we're working with in terms of origination fit with the requirements of the investor. And I think this is critical going forward, is the need for the NGOs and the investment community and groups like GCF to facilitate all this, bringing them together, using their own strengths, but really trying to see ways to really bridge that missing middle of getting smaller projects into investable cases. As my time is limited, the third barrier that I mentioned, the third challenge, is risk. How do you invest into very risky environments? Well, the finance partners CFM and FMO are developing quite interesting financial instruments, very innovative financial instruments, which are able to take on much higher levels of risk, and particularly around using equity, risk-sharing facilities, and as I mentioned before, using grants to mitigate early risks for companies. We've also been developing and pooling public and private funding into structured blended finance vehicles, as I mentioned earlier, to try to allow the public finance to take the early tranches of risk, to then bring in the private capital to scale up and to attract more private capital coming into these investments. So the land use and the water facilities are concessional financial vehicles, which then crowd in commercial finance, and the target is to try to raise that to 1 billion by next year. So that's just one example of how we're trying to respond to these challenges. And I think if we can find different ways to respond to that, then we can certainly mobilize a lot more investment into climate change adaptation. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Richard. Okay, well, all panelists, I think, are still on the call and ready for some questions, and we have a few. We have about 20 minutes left altogether, so I'm hoping that we can have, as well as time for some last words from everybody, but let's try and address some of these questions. In the meantime, let's try and keep the answers concise if we can. First of all, we'll come back to Frank. Question from one of our audience members: how green is the COVID recovery in reality? And are nature-based solutions really important for countries? Do you see this being reflected in what you're seeing?
Yes, well, the overall amounts of money, even before the US added 1.9 trillion, was something like $14 trillion. Of that, there is a very nice report out from Vivid Economics that is called the Greenness of Stimulus Index. They have done that since May last year. I think they've brought out 5. In May last year, you could see there was almost zero money going to the green part of the recovery. And in February, the latest version of that report, it showed that about $4.5 trillion was in the 5 sectors that are most relevant for the green economy. And only, you could say, $1.4 trillion of that was green. So disappointing from one perspective. On the other hand, the share of the green side in the recovery has certainly gone up quite a bit since May last year. And indeed, if countries are taking more decisions, like in Canada, that in last December came out with a new package that was very green, Denmark, Korea, there are a number of countries that are putting green money into recovery. Of course, those are mostly developed countries. We see some small bits of green in India and in China, but overwhelmingly their recovery is not green. And of course, most developing countries don't have any money to put into recovery. So there we're really talking about international solidarity and opportunities, I would say, for greening ODA. And ODA is not yet very green. Many countries have only a very small share of their ODA that is, official development assistance that is green. And there is a real opportunity to increase that share. Leading providers, some European countries have more than 40% of all their ODA that is either principally or significantly tracked to environment or climate. But countries like Korea have less than 10%, but have made a commitment to at least double that. And we are discussing with them that if they want to have a Green Deal in Korea, but also internationally, frankly, really, at least half of all the ODA should be green. So Ben, not very much of the overall recovery is green, but 1.4 trillion on the other hand is nothing to sneeze at either. Hopefully we can increase that share, but for developing countries, it will be really important if we're managing to increase the green share of ODA.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so a lot more work to do to turn recovery on green rhetoric on green recovery into reality. But yeah, there is, as you say, a good foundation to build on. Anya, we have another question for you. How do you see the possibilities for small-scale farmers and civil society to access funding for climate change adaptation?
Okay, well, thanks very much, Ben. Yeah, where we're going in the Green Climate Fund in terms of developing these sorts of funds where projects can be aggregated, that is really opening doors, I think, for small-scale farmers, for small communities, for community-based adaptation, for CSOs to access climate finance. I'll give you an example of where the private sector is joining hands with GCF in doing this. There's a big new fund called the Subnational Climate Facility, SNCF, which has been created by GCF together with Pegasus Capital. And we hope that as private investors, more private investors come in, that's going to be up to $1 billion of climate finance ultimately. The beauty of this is that while 45 countries have opted to join the SNCF, the Subnational Climate Fund, that means that, you know, in terms of country ownership, the countries have said, yes, they want to be part of this new opportunity, but the actual funding is made available at subnational level to cities, to communities, to farmers cooperatives, for example. And I think that this is the way that we're going to need to go in terms of accessing climate finance, because by their nature, a lot of these much smaller organizations, they cannot invest the sort of time and effort it needs to become accredited to the Green Climate Fund themselves. We have a lot of even national level entities called the direct access entities that, you know, take a long time to become accredited to the Green Climate Fund. But these kinds of funds, I think, really make it possible and open up the market. And these funds are establishing, you know, groundbreaking metrics, really, in terms of measuring climate risk and in terms of, you know, providing the backup where GCF provides a first loss guarantee for these projects, small-scale climate projects, to go ahead. Yeah, so I think, you know, that's one very specific and concrete example that was approved by the board in 2020. It's very much, you know, lends itself to green recovery types of projects, and it's actually open for people to then approach Pegasus Capital, to approach the Subnational Climate Facility, and to apply for these kinds of smaller scale funds from that facility. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Anya. So that's some good practical examples, some encouraging ideas there. For Richard, we have a question. What innovative financing for ecosystems is available? How can green bonds and insurance be used for ecosystems? And can you provide perhaps some examples, more examples, where the private sector has invested in nature-based solutions?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ben. Green bonds. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting area. And we saw, I don't know if people follow, but 2 weeks ago, that AXA Insurance and Forest Carbon will now be issuing forest bonds for peatland areas in Indonesia. And potentially that could be used for other countries, obviously with a peatland area. So there's the private sector is becoming increasingly interested in bonds or debt. We know also the TLFF has got a facility for the tropical landscape forest facility in Indonesia has a facility also to issue bonds. So I think this is quite a fertile area. Actually, we under the Dfcd are interested are currently looking at the possibilities for the forestry sector. And in Malaysia and other countries, we're also looking at potential how we could work with financial issuers in these countries for bonds. So I see that as a growth area going forward. In terms of tried and tested and really strong examples, it's still early days. And I think what's very important is that a lot of these new initiatives have time and they have ability to provide certain levels of technical assistance up front, a bit like the origination facility, to test it and to make it work, and then to scale it and replicate it. Once we can get good examples of it working, then that's when the private sector will come in and take it over. So we need clear metrics around monitoring, around how it be structured and so forth. So yeah, lots of interesting, and I think this is a really big growth area, and I think for GCF it's probably a very important area is to look at how to get the financing into the ecosystems in the forestry sector now, because it's a really big area to take off, I believe, going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so really, once we have more proof of concept, we can expect private sector investment really to accelerate. One, just quickly, Farzana, one very specific question for you, and then we'll go and try and go to a wrap up. Very short messages from all the panelists. Could you provide some examples of insurance products for mangroves and coastal areas in Bangladesh?
Not yet. These products have mangroves area of still under process, but the products that we have done for weather-based index crop insurance products like industrial potato, rice, then bitter gourd, and then cassava. So these are some projects that we have done. But since I've mentioned that, and in the coastal areas, still it's a it's a huge challenge. We have started with the water basin pilot project with the government, but I think the technology, the satellite technology, using the help of the drone and using the weather forecast, that would really help us. We have an app where the farmers are connected and they are getting all those signals and how to prevent, how to prevent their crops against those adverse weather conditions, and how to kind of take prevention and how to kind of go into a safer location. So that these are the things that have started, but definitely that would be an area that we will be focusing on. And the other part is like fisheries and poultry. These are the two other sectors that are coming up.
Hey, thanks, Farzana. So yeah, we really are getting close to the end of the session. I think it's been very rich. Before we close, before I hand back to Chris, can I just go around the panel and have some very quick thoughts, 1 minute max, to try to answer the question, what is the most encouraging signal in the climate finance sector today that gives you confidence for effective alignment of private and public investment over the next 10 years? And if I can come to Frank first on that.
Yes, not an easy question to answer, I think. I think there is not one big positive signal that I can come up with, other than that I think the constant climate crisis that we are seeing are rapidly ratcheting up the need. So that's not so positive, but I do think that, frankly, just because we see such rapidly increasing consequences of climate, we'll see increasing priority. So we will have to find ways to mobilize more money. Nature-based solutions have to be key for developing countries. And I'm not really saying that I see it happen automatically, but I think in the session here, you have heard at least enough positive starting points that we could build on. But I don't think there is a silver bullet that I can see, but maybe one of the panelists will have a better answer than I have. I think there's a lot more work to be done. It's necessary though. Back to you.
Increasing need will focus minds, maybe.
Yes.
Anya, do you have a positive message?
Well, thank you. Yes, I think, the place where we need to look to make adaptation and resilience projects, and specifically nature-based solutions, attractive to the private sector is in terms of metrics. People value what they can measure, and we need to be able to give the private sector comfort that projects are achieving the results that they set out to achieve, and they're achieving impact. Now, on the mitigation side, as we know, measuring the reduction in carbon emissions, the greenhouse gas calculations, there are some methodologies out there, but broadly, that's an area which is now becoming very well established, and it's making possible the development of carbon pricing and carbon markets, carbon credits, and so on. What we need on the adaptation and resilience side, and also specifically for nature-based solutions, is much better metrics. We have metrics in terms of numbers of beneficiaries supported. We have metrics in terms of hectares of degraded land restored, for example. But I think we need to become much more fine-grained and identify metrics. So, for example, when we're talking about numbers of beneficiaries, it's not just to see how many people are in some way positively impacted, but for example, to look at asset indices. How are the assets and the livelihoods of these beneficiaries actually specifically improved from the beginning of the project to the end? I think these are the kinds of developments that we're going to have to see. I have great hope for the decade of ecosystem restoration, which is starting now and going through to 2030, that the development of metrics in terms of measuring the positive impact of nature-based solutions and the multiple values of nature-based solutions is going to be much better understood and much better measured. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. Okay, Farzana, for you, positive message to leave us with, less than 30 seconds.
Well, I feel more encouraged because I've got a lot of signals that I've mentioned that we're a practitioner and we are achieving results. What Anne mentioned, that impact is very important. Whether you're creating impact, whether the mechanism is helping the farmers to grow and improving their livelihood, and also the matrix is very important for the risk mitigation. So I feel that multi-stakeholder approach, appropriate technology, satellite image, and then weather-based indexed insurance coverage is like in South Asia, it's becoming more, more visible. So, and I think greater collaboration, which I've mentioned, that is the key for a success, greater collaboration between private sector and public sector, that we're going there and learning from the mistakes and learning from our, activities, and then provide more coverage that will create more impact and achieve the SDG goals. So I'm pretty hopeful. Thank you.
Farzana. Yeah, and as long as you stay in business, we should all be hopeful. Richard, some positive vibes from you before we go?
Yeah, just I guess I think most of it's been said, Ben, thanks. And the point just mentioned there on partnerships and the private sector and the public sector coming together, they're very different worlds, and they need to stick to what they know and what they do best, but at the same time, they need to understand each other and find ways to work together. And I think going forward, that's going to be a critical gap, because the private sector is now coming in, but of course, the private sector is profit driven. So how do we ensure that we meet all these different indicators I think that's going to be a critical going forward. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks to all our four panelists, Richard, Farzana, Anya, Frank. Thanks to all the people who've joined in. We've had quite a good attendance, and now I'll hand back to Chris to close.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to the panel for your very inspirational ideas and experiences how to tackle this challenge. So thank you to Anya, Farzana, Richard, Frank, Taka, Ben, and the technical team. And I'd just like to remind people that at 2 o'clock Bangkok time, 4 o'clock Korean time, there is the final session today, which brings together all the consolidated sections of the APAN workshop, which might be interesting for people to attend. So I'd like to wish everyone a good weekend. We've all had plenty of food for thought of how we can solve these issues. I think that there are big challenges, but I think humans can overcome this. Hopefully we can overcome it on time and not wait till it becomes a crisis like COVID before we really tackle this challenge. But there are enough signs of good support from private sector, public sector initiatives around the world that I think leaves me hopeful about nature-based solutions. Especially the last 2 or 3 years, it's really come to the forefront of policy making around the world. So thank you very much, everyone, and wish you a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for attending today's session as part of the 7th Asia Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum. Please join us for the closing session of the forum, Scaling Up Action, beginning at 2 p.m. Bangkok time. Within the community, you can also explore the exhibitions as well as chat or set up meetings with other conference attendees. Join the conversation on social media using the hashtag APAN 2020. Thank you once again for your participation and see you in the next session.